Hey, what's up, guys? I'm actually sitting outside of the gym right now. I'm about to go in and get a workout done. I fortunately have Thanksgiving, like the Thanksgiving weekend off, so I'm hopefully going to catch up on some charting as well as some, just personal care stuff. I haven't been to the gym in a while because just constantly picking up shifts and being called in. But, during the holiday seasons, I think one of the biggest things I do is it causes me to self-reflect, and this past year has been insane for me. If you've seen my other videos, you've known that I started on a GLP-1 agonist. I've lost over 140 pounds, and it's been life-changing. It's literally changed my life. It's changed my relationship with other people, the way that I view the world. It just being overweight, obese, and having chronic sleep apnea, just it was not a good way to live. I felt like I was constantly miserable, and this medication and this weight loss has been life changing for me. But when I do reflect on it, there are some regrets and changes I wish I made, and I think the biggest one is that I wish I had done more weight training and resistance training. One of the biggest concerns that a lot of people have with GLP-1 agonists is muscle loss. The media likes to harp on the fact that a lot of the weight that's lost on GLP-1s is muscle, and to a point, to an extent, they are correct. They're not completely wrong. I do think it's blown out of proportion. I do think most of the weight that is lost, depending on your starting weight, if you are someone like me who is morbidly obese, a lot of the weight that was lost was fat. However, once you start getting down to a healthier goal weight, BMI of around 30, maybe even like 32, once you start getting around to a normal weight, at least physically, but based on the scale, you can still lose a few pounds, or how you feel, maybe you need to lose a few pounds. Once you start losing weight, from there, it's easy to lose muscle as well. It's hard for the body to kind of differentiate. So just quickly, the body is constantly balancing two major physiologic processes. There's a catabolic process, which is, breaking things down, such as fat, muscle. Then there's also anabolic processes that's like building things up, such as, once again, fat or muscle. So you've probably heard of anabolic steroids. They're called anabolic because they help build muscle. So the body is constantly fighting between anabolic processes and catabolic processes. And the body's not perfect. It doesn't know, hey, I need to break down fat. I should only break down fat. When you're losing weight, you're in a state of catabolism. You're breaking things down. The goal is to break down as much fat as possible, but the body's not perfect. So you will lose muscle along the way. When you're morbidly obese, your fat to muscle ratio is much higher. It's easier for the body to break down fat than it is muscle because you have so much of an excess of it. Once you start getting to a more normal weight and you want to lose a few more pounds, or you feel like you can lose a few more pounds, that's when the body is not sure if it should break down muscle or if it should break down fat. It becomes a lot more difficult to differentiate. I think initially, traditionally, when I say the prior way of losing weight, such as diet and exercise, prevented or at least minimized muscle loss, because a lot of people weren't eating at such severe caloric deficits before GLP-1 agonists. They weren't eating at such a massive restriction, and they were also exercising because they couldn't eat at such a large restriction. GLP-1 agonists, because of the way they act on the brain and the way that they act on the GI system and cause delayed gastric emptying, people are able to go days without eating. It's insane. I mean, you can eat at a severe caloric restriction. Usually the body kicks in, or usually the brain kicks in, and a survival instinct kicks in saying, hey, you need to eat calories. But GLP-1 agonists prevent that, that mechanism from acting. So you can go days without eating. It's not good. It's not healthy, right? So because of that, because before you couldn't eat at such restrictions, and you needed to work out to make up for that, people did not lose muscle as much. But now people are able to sit or go through their daily lives and eat almost nothing. Well, which allows them to lose weight. But the downside is you're losing muscle as well because you don't have that, that exercise component. And that's kind of what I wanted to touch base on. Making sure that while you are eating in a calorie deficit, the best way to preserve muscle is to incorporate heavy resistance training. It's important to eat a good amount of protein as well, but eating protein without having any sort of stimulus for the muscle means nothing. You can eat as much protein as you want, but you are not going to preserve muscle unless you also incorporate heavy resistance training. And it's easy for me to say this, but this was one of my biggest downsides. That was my biggest flaw. When I started my GLP-1 journey, I did not incorporate heavy resistance training. I incorporated cardio because for me it was easy to track the amount of calories that I was burning with cardio, and all I cared about was losing weight. All I cared about was a number on a scale. And even as a licensed physician who's been, practicing for years, who's completed residency, who's done so much medical training, who's had patients on this medication, and I've heard about their successes, their failures, where they went wrong, I still focused on a number. All I cared about was losing weight. And I think that was such an unhealthy mindset that it took a little while for me to snap out of. But incorporating heavy resistance training is allowing me to slowly build back muscle. I wish I had started this sooner, and this is my message to all of you. Start resistance training as soon as you start on a GLP-1. Even if you're eating less calories, even if you feel tired, obviously listen to your body. Don't overexert yourself, but incorporate resistance training where you can, because that is so, so important to maintaining a healthy amount of muscle. And ultimately, muscle also dictates your basal metabolic rate. It dictates the amount of calories you burn while doing nothing. So, if you go on the best way to calculate how many calories your body needs is by going online to it's called a TDEE calculator, total daily energy expenditure. It'll tell you basically how many calories your body burns just by existing. And muscle mass raises that number. There's nothing else that will raise that number. Muscle does, though. So muscle, when people say muscle burns fat, well, in the long term, this is exactly why. This is the mechanism of how that happens. So it's so important to incorporate heavy resistance training, because long term, I see a lot of patients in the hospital who come in because of exacerbations of chronic illness. They come in, even the healthy ones, they come in because even though cardiovascular wise they may be super healthy, they fall, they trip, or they get into an accident and they break a bone, they hurt themselves. They do not have the amount of muscle to preserve their body mass, and it's dangerous. When you don't, muscle is very easy. It's very easy to lose muscle as you age. So incorporating heavy resistance training now and building that base of skeletal muscle will, in the long term, help you. And God forbid something happens, you fall or you trip or you get into an accident, it will help preserve your bone mass. I also think the concern that people have about losing muscle mass while on a GLP-1 agonist is warranted, but I think it's, like I said earlier, I think it's blown out of proportion. If you look at the studies, so prior to GLP-1 agonists, if your BMI was greater than 40 and you had a comorbidity such as diabetes, the recommended treatment is bariatric surgery. So if you look at the studies for bariatric surgery, you'll also notice that a lot of the weight loss is muscle mass. I'll post some of the links below, but the studies showed that patients post bariatric surgery, they lost a good amount of muscle, and it's for the same reason that I mentioned before. Because what bariatric surgery does, depending on the type of surgery, it basically shrinks your stomach, so you can't take in as many calories. It prevents you from eating in a caloric excess, and it makes eating in a significant calorie restriction much easier, which is almost what GLP-1s do. So, when people get these bariatric surgeries, they're able to eat in a caloric restriction without having to go to the gym, without having to exercise. And what did we see happens with that? You lose muscle mass in the long term. So I think it's just crazy that people are fear mongering about GLP-1s causing muscle mass loss, while they're so quick to, push these surgeries, these bariatric surgeries, that one, you have to go under anesthesia. They're expensive procedures, and it still causes muscle mass loss. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand why as a society, or, as a medical field, we're pushing surgeries instead of allowing patients to lose weight in a healthier fashion. It just makes no sense to me. If your concern is muscle mass, it makes absolutely no sense to me. It really doesn't. But, I guess that's an argument for another day. But, all of this is basically just to say, make sure you incorporate heavy resistance training into your daily schedule. People push consuming protein, and eating protein and hitting, certain protein goals is important, but you can eat as much protein as you want. If there is no stimulus, the muscle will still atrophy, which means, get smaller and break down, and it won't grow. You won't even be able to preserve it. Eating protein does not just preserve muscle. You need a stimulus. That's why sometimes when you hit the gym really hard and you have a heavy workout, you'll notice that your body isn't just tired, but your mind is tired, because there's an actual mental, neurological component to all of this. And that neurological stimulus allows and helps for muscle to grow. So, it's a mistake that I made, and I'm hopefully making this video to share my journey, but also show you guys and hopefully prevent this from happening to you guys. So I definitely recommend incorporating heavy resistance training as early as possible, and hopefully you're able to preserve as much muscle mass, or maybe even add on muscle mass while on your GLP-1 journey. All right, I'm gonna go hit the gym, and I will talk to you guys later.